She woke up every morning before the sun. Not because she wanted to, but because rent didn't wait and tips weren't always enough. Her name was Sarah, just 22, living in a shared trailer on the edge of town. Her phone screen was cracked, her shoes were worn, but she kept showing up, every single day. No time for dreams, only time to keep going. During the day, she cleaned houses in a quiet neighborhood where she'd never be able to afford even a garage. She wiped countertops she'd never eat on, made beds she'd never sleep in. The silence in those homes reminded her of everything she didn't have. But she worked fast, stayed polite, and hoped the next homeowner might leave a few extra dollars as a tip. At night, she tied her apron, pulled her hair back, and served burgers and milkshakes at a roadside diner. The place smelled like grease and old coffee, and the regulars barely looked her in the eye. But she smiled anyway, not because life was good, but because kindness cost nothing. And sometimes, it helped her feel like she still mattered. She didn't complain. Not to her coworkers, not to the customers, not even to herself. Complaining wouldn't pay the bills. What she wanted wasn't luxury. She just wanted a break. A moment to breathe. Maybe finish school one day. Maybe live in a place where the roof didn't leak when it rained. That was it. Just a small, quiet life she could call her own. One afternoon, Sarah was assigned a new cleaning client, an older man who lived alone in a large house at the end of a quiet street. The place looked like something out of a magazine. Tall ceilings, old wood floors, and a garden that seemed too perfect to be real. She almost didn't want to touch anything. It felt like stepping into a life she was never meant to see. But work was work, and she needed the paycheck. The man, Mr. Dalton, didn't say much when she first arrived. He gave simple instructions, then disappeared into his study with a book or a cup of tea. But there was something different about him. He didn't treat her like help. He opened doors for her. He asked how her day was, and when she responded, he actually listened. That alone set him apart. Most of the homes she cleaned felt cold, even when they were filled with light. But his didn't. Mr. Dalton didn't make her feel small. He thanked her at the end of each shift, sometimes even left little snacks in the kitchen for her to take home. It was the kind of basic decency that felt rare in her world. And though they barely spoke, she felt something strange. Safe. She never asked him questions. It wasn't her place. All she knew was that he had money, more than she'd ever seen, and yet he lived quietly. No expensive cars, no loud parties, just books, music, and a house filled with stillness. Over time, his silence stopped feeling intimidating, felt calm, and for a girl used to chaos, that was a gift. Sarah never mentioned her birthday to anyone. It came and went like any other day. No calls, no cake, no celebration. She was used to that. But one afternoon, as she finished wiping down the kitchen counters, Mr. Dalton walked over and handed her a small envelope. "Happy birthday," he said gently, then turned back toward his study like it was nothing. She froze. For a second, she thought he might be mistaken. No one had remembered her birthday in years, not even her coworkers at the diner. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper, a lottery ticket. Just one. No card, no message. Just that simple slip. She stared at it, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she whispered, more surprised by the gesture than the gift itself. It wasn't about the lottery ticket. It was the fact that someone noticed her at all. Mr. Dalton hadn't asked for anything, hadn't made a big deal out of it. Just a small act of kindness that felt far bigger than it looked. That night, she sat on her thin mattress in the trailer and stared at the ticket for a long time. She didn't expect to win. She never expected much. Still, for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe the world wasn't entirely indifferent. It was such a simple thing, and yet it stayed with her. She folded the ticket carefully and placed it inside her old wallet, next to the photo of her as a baby, the only one she had. She didn't know it yet, but that small moment would mark the beginning of everything. A few days later, while waiting for her shift at the diner to start, Sarah remembered the ticket. She stood in front of a small gas station counter, barely awake, and scanned it at the machine near the door. First, she thought it was a mistake. Then the clerk looked at the screen, blinked twice and said, "You might want to sit down." Her hands went cold. She had just won over $3 million. She didn't scream. She didn't jump. She just stood there, trying to understand what had just happened. That number didn't belong to her world. She was used to overdraft fees and gas station coffee, not life-changing jackpots. As she walked out with the receipt in her pocket, everything felt blurry, like she was floating through someone else's life. But deep down, a single thought kept repeating, "You're free now." Back in the trailer, she opened a notebook and started writing. Her first plan wasn't a mansion or designer clothes. It was paying off every cent she owed. Student loans she never got to use. Old medical bills. Rent. Then she looked up local colleges. She'd always wanted to study early childhood education, maybe become a teacher someday. It finally felt possible. The next morning, she went to work like usual, but something had shifted. She bought a reliable used car, nothing fancy, just something that started on the first try. For the first time in years, she didn't feel stuck. But the money didn't make her reckless. If anything, it made her quiet, careful. She still cleaned Mr. Dalton's house, even though she didn't need the paycheck anymore. Something about it kept her grounded. Sarah waited until the end of her next shift at Mr. Dalton's house before saying anything. Her heart was pounding. She didn't know how to bring it up, but she couldn't ignore it either. "The ticket you gave me, it won," she finally said, her voice shaking. "It's a lot of money. I want to give you some." He looked up slowly, then smiled, not surprised, not excited, just calm. He shook his head gently and said, "It was always yours." She blinked, confused. She tried again, insisting it was only fair. But he didn't budge. "I gave it to you. A gift is a gift," he said softly. There was something in his eyes, something quiet but heavy. It felt like he knew something she didn't, but he wasn't ready to say it. Sarah left that day with more questions than answers. She replayed his words all night. It was always yours. What did that mean? It was just a birthday gift, wasn't it? She thought about the way he had watched her when she spoke, how he always seemed thoughtful around her. But still, there had never been a moment that hinted at anything more. At least not yet. The money had changed her life, but now his words were changing her thoughts. It wasn't just luck anymore. It felt like something deeper was unfolding. She felt grateful but also unsettled. Like there was a part of her story she hadn't been told. And for the first time since winning, the money didn't feel like the biggest mystery in her life. News of Sarah's lottery win spread fast. A local paper picked up her story. Young girl working 2 jobs wins millions with a gifted ticket. Then it made it to a morning show. People loved it. The hardworking girl with nothing, suddenly given a shot at a better life. For a few days, her phone didn't stop buzzing. Interviews, messages, even strangers asking for help. It was overwhelming, but she stayed humble. Then, one afternoon, a woman knocked on her trailer door. She looked nervous, maybe even scared. "My name is Laura," she said, holding out an old photo. "I think I'm your mother." Sarah froze. The woman held a picture of a baby that looked exactly like her, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Behind the photo was a worn birth certificate. Same name, same birthday. Sarah didn't know what to say. Laura told her a story that Sarah had never heard before. She had been young, just 17, when she got pregnant. Her family had disowned her, and she struggled on her own. After giving birth, she left Sarah with a family friend for what was supposed to be a short time, but life unraveled. When she returned, the people were gone. No trace of the baby, no answers. She had searched for years, but gave up hope. Sarah didn't know what to feel. Part of her was angry. Why now? Why after all this time? But another part of her saw the sadness in Laura's eyes and knew this wasn't about money. The timing, the photo, the details, it all felt too real to be fake. Still, something didn't sit right. Why did Mr. Dalton say, "It was always yours"? And why did this woman suddenly appear now? The pieces were close, but the puzzle wasn't complete yet. It was Mr. Dalton who called her the next day. His voice was quieter than usual. He asked if she could stop by the house. There was something he needed to tell her. When she arrived, he was already waiting in the living room, an old photo album resting on his lap. He didn't say much at first, just flipped through a few pages until he stopped at a photo of a young woman holding a baby. Her mother. He explained that decades ago, he had been in a short but meaningful relationship. They were young, and life had pulled them in different directions. The woman had left suddenly, never told him she was pregnant, and he had always wondered why. Her name was Laura, he said. I never saw her again. Sarah sat frozen, listening, as her world quietly shifted under her feet. Everything started to make sense. He had always felt a strange connection to her. The way she moved, how she thought, how familiar she seemed. At first, he thought it was just coincidence. But when the story hit the news, and the woman claiming to be Sarah's mother appeared, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He had the photo. He remembered the eyes. And after all these years, the truth came out. Sarah was his daughter. Sarah didn't speak for a long time. Her mind replayed every moment. Every kind word. Every time he showed her quiet respect. The lottery ticket. The way he said, "It was always yours." It all meant something now. She wasn't just lucky. She had been walking beside a missing part of herself all along. The money didn't change her life. The truth did. And finally, the pieces fit. Mr. Dalton invited her back a few days later, this time with papers. A lawyer sat at the kitchen table already waiting. Sarah didn't know what to expect, but she definitely wasn't prepared for what came next. The lawyer explained that years ago, Mr. Dalton had written a will. At the time, he didn't know he had a daughter. But now that he did, he had already made updates. Everything would go to her. The house, the land, and a portfolio of assets, stocks, savings, even a small business he had once owned. All of it had her name on it now. Sarah stared in disbelief. She had just adjusted to the idea of not being poor anymore. But this was something else. It wasn't just about money. It was about roots, belonging, a place in the world she never thought she had. Mr. Dalton watched her quietly, letting the truth sink in. I spent my life building something, he said softly, but I never knew who I was building it for. His words hit her harder than anything else. For so long, she thought she had no one. Now she was being told that not only did she have family, she had a legacy. One she didn't have to chase. One that had been waiting for her. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. She thought back to all the nights she walked home in the cold after her shifts, dreaming of just one break. And now she realized this wasn't a break. This was her story coming full circle. The lottery ticket felt like a miracle, but it had only been the door. What waited behind it was the truth about who she was, and where she truly belonged. At night, Sarah lay awake in the same bed she once cleaned as a maid, now her own. The silence felt heavier than ever. She had everything she once prayed for. A home, money, even family. But inside, her heart was tangled with doubt. Was it all real? Or had she been pulled into something bigger than she could handle? She started to question everyone. Mr. Dalton had been kind, but now that she was his daughter, would that kindness have existed without the lottery win? And what about Laura, the woman who claimed to be her mother? Would she have shown up if Sarah hadn't made headlines? It was hard to tell what came from love and what came from greed. The line between the two felt blurry. Even simple moments became complicated. She wanted to feel happy, but guilt kept creeping in. Why her? Why now? So many people were still struggling. Meanwhile, she lived in a mansion she never earned and had money she didn't work for. That thought made her feel like an imposter in her own life. Someone playing a role she hadn't auditioned for. She avoided phone calls, stopped answering texts, and stayed in her room most days. From the outside, she had it all. But on the inside, she felt like she was slipping away. For a girl who had spent her whole life surviving with grit and humility, the sudden weight of wealth, family, and attention was harder to carry than any double shift she'd ever worked. It took time, months, not days, but Sarah slowly began to find her footing again. She started talking to Mr. Dalton more, not just as a former employer or even a father, but as a person. The walls between them softened. She didn't get all the answers she wanted, but she realized something important. Healing doesn't always come from clarity. Sometimes it comes from grace. She began to look outward. She remembered the girls she used to work with at the diner. The ones juggling school, bills, and broken dreams. That's when she got an idea. Using part of her inheritance, she started a local fund to support women working 2 jobs while pursuing education. She kept it low profile. No press, no speeches. Just real help for real people just like she had once needed. The house became a home. The guilt didn't disappear completely, but it stopped controlling her. Sarah accepted her story, piece by piece. She stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What can I do with it?" She didn't need to prove she deserved it anymore. She just needed to live it with purpose. Her past shaped her, but her future would be something she'd get to build. In the quiet moments, she often thought back to that simple birthday gift. The ticket that felt like luck. But now she saw it differently. The money wasn't the miracle. Knowing who she was, that was. And in the end, she learned the most powerful truth of all. Sometimes, life waits to give you what's yours until you're finally strong enough to carry it. What would you do if your whole life changed overnight? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that prove anything is possible.